In the name of God, who is love, beloved, and love overflowing. Amen. I just have to say, I came here this morning and saw all those tremendous amounts of goodies for all the campers at Camp St. Christopher. And we had our little bloopers with weird mics and funny readings and such. I just love serving you. I really do. I think you guys are great. We can all be who we are, mistakes, whatever, flubs, it's bloopers, it's great. It's wonderful to be with people who can be real and authentic with one another. I love that about this church. When you look at the old-timey children's Bibles, and some of them even today are the same, particularly the ones that include the Hebrew scriptures, you'll see that the prophets, major and minor, are all sort of dressed up as heroes of the Bible. But the truth is, they were hated. They were looked upon as nuts. It's only in our day and age that we look back and say, oh yes, they were the heroes, but it was not an easy job. King Ahab, I used to love hearing this. King Ahab used to speak of Elijah as the troubler of Israel. Prophets, they had their work cut out for them. They would call out any leader, no matter how high or low the station, but usually high since they were leaders, and call them out on any kind of ethical or just even run-of-the-mill hypocrisy. The prophets were the ones who spoke truth to power. And no matter what the day or age, it's never received well by those in power. And in today's gospel passage, the same went for John the Baptist, even the disciples later on, but even Jesus. Jesus said, "But to what will I compare this generation? It's like children sitting in the marketplace and calling to one another, 'We played the flute for you and you didn't dance. We wailed and you didn't mourn.' For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, 'Look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.' Yet wisdom is vindicated by her deeds." So what Jesus is saying in this passage today is that the crowds, and frankly, human beings in general, let's face it, are very fickle. They are basically saying to Jesus all the time, really, throughout his ministry, "You never do what we want you to do." It's almost like raising kids, right? "We played the flute for you and you didn't dance. We wailed and you didn't mourn." It's pretty self-centered, isn't it? Aren't you coming here to make, this is sort of so common. It's like confusing God with Santa Claus. You're not doing what we want you to do. It's pretty self-centered, and particularly when you think about how compassionate Jesus was to people, particularly the people that the elite wanted nothing to do with. In regards to their feelings toward John the Baptist, the people in power, and I'm talking about their own Jewish leadership, not as a whole maybe, but quite a few, they accused him of being demonic. They wrote Jesus off as being a glutton simply because he accepted invitations to eat at various people's homes that other people would consider unclean. So the prophets, John the Baptist and Jesus himself, couldn't win for losing. It's impossible. What intrigues me about this is that neither the prophets, John the Baptist, or Jesus responded in anger or by trying to get the people to like them. I find that fascinating because my first reaction would have been to find some way to bend over backwards to get those folks to hear what I have to say, to like me, By habit, I am a people pleaser, and I've had to work through many instances where I have noticed my behavior leaning towards that way. But that wasn't the case with the prophets, and it wasn't the case certainly with John the Baptist, and it was not the case with Jesus. They were much more secure in themselves, that they were able to just let it go, as the old song that we always hear says. They were able to just let go of trying to please everybody because they knew it was impossible. You can't make everybody happy. You're not chocolate. So this is a goal to place before our attention, I believe. If you, like me, can identify with this pattern of trying to make everybody happy, it really is an impossible task. It's exhausting. And I think this is the wisdom that Jesus says is vindicated by her deeds. He never bent over backwards trying to make people happy, trying to make people listen, trying to do what he was recommending. He just let it go. He kept his mission of proclaiming the unconditional love of God to all people, and the work of the kingdom his main goal. So we might conclude that it is certainly wise that we will, from time to time, need to detach with love from certain people. Oh, we have a visitor, apparently. We have a visitor, I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. Okay, so we can conclude that it is certainly wise that we will, from time to time, need to detach with love from certain people, which is really hard. Sometimes we need to detach from certain situations with love so we don't get distracted from our own mission and health. We can and should still pray for others, even help others, but we don't have to put ourselves in a position of being continually used or abused, particularly if the person refuses to change. That's always the hard part, right? When you have a family member that you know you're never going to make happy because their idea of happiness is different from yours. Their behavior has more to do with them than it has to do with you. And I think Jesus knew that. That's why he could walk away, even though, all he did was preach love and justice, but he still had to sometimes walk away from folks because they just would pick at every single thing he said, and there was no making them happy. He was able to walk away. I think that's a really good and healthy lesson for all of us. We cannot make other people change, and we cannot control them. We cannot make them do what we think is our will, even if it's healthy for them. They have to want to change. And the more we try, the more obvious it becomes that the problem actually becomes us. It's like that old saying, we have met the enemy and it is us. Sometimes when we keep trying to change somebody else, it just makes us more sick. And so we have to learn to walk away and allow others to desire change. Then we can be wide open and help them. But they have to do the footwork. So Jesus says a prayer then, thanking God, and that it is the humble ones, the ones who think they have all the answers to everybody else's issues, the ones that think they know everything. This is one of the reasons why Matthew would say, blessed are the poor in spirit. Those are the people who are humble, who say, I don't know it all. I'm open, I'm teachable, right? So Jesus says, it is the humble ones who make the assumption that whatever Jesus is doing or teaching, whatever he may be, whoever he's visiting, there must be a good reason. Jesus is saying this is the way of the wise, which is kind of a funny insult because it's usually the educated religious elite that are so busy complaining about who Jesus is hanging out with, right? It's usually the religious elite that were condemning the prophets. So calling the regular folk wise by what he's saying is really kind of it's a funny, gentle insult, frankly. Jesus says, all things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. And this is not to say that Jesus is being exclusionary, but that the reason he's hanging out with what the religious authorities call sinners is because he's revealing the love and presence of God to them on their turf. That's something, I guess, that the religious leaders of Jesus' time did not want to do. They figured you have to go to them, that they would have to come to Jesus. But he was going to the people. And it wasn't received well by the elite. And that's when Jesus gives what is called the comfortable words, saying, "Come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy and my burden is light." These really, truly are comfortable words for people who have lost hope. I can imagine Jesus saying these very words to tax collectors, prostitutes, and other people who have perhaps led less than stellar lives. These are the common folk who are indeed burdened with worry, the burden of somehow making enough money to pay the rent, feed their families, keep the ruling authorities off their backs, and somehow still have some time to relax and put their feet up from time to time. So it is to those simple, hard-working folks, and to you and me, that Jesus says, come to me, and I will give you rest. And that's a whole point of prayer and meditation, isn't it? To just rest in the presence of God. And just take that time to remember how beloved you really are. There once was a Zen master. I read this story recently that I really liked. A Zen master named Sado Rei Ronsi, who once said, "To those of you who are suffering immediate and omnipresent hardships, my heart goes out to you. At my age, I am well acquainted with pain, but I want you to know that pain is a gateway to understanding. And when it's time to suffer, you should suffer. And when it's time to cry, you should cry. Cry completely. Cry until there are no more tears, and then recognize in your exhaustion that you're alive. The sun still rises and sets. The seasons still come and go. Absolutely nothing remains the same, and that includes suffering. When the suffering ends, wisdom begins to raise the right questions." And Jesus is basically saying the same thing. He knew what it was to suffer. He knew and knows that sometimes the only reasonable response to life's hardships is to have a good cry, and cry as much and as often as you need to. And then when you're ready, and it may come in fits and spurts, but when you're ready, look back on those times and see what kind of lessons you have learned from that grief. Jesus even takes it a step further. He says, yes, we all suffer, and don't let anyone ever tell you not to cry. But come to me. Come to me with all your pain, with all your anger, with all your grief and frustration, and let me in to the heart of your heart so I can begin to redeem that experience and help you grow from it. It is not a sign of weak faith to have a good cry. It is not a sign that there's something wrong with you. As one meme I read said, Jesus didn't say, "Come to me, all who are crushing it, living your best life, and I will give you rest." He said, "Come to me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest." which means if you're discouraged, tired, or weary, don't worry. That's exactly how Jesus expected you to come to him. I know sometimes we feel a little guilty when we are maybe even angry with God, or we're crying because we didn't get the miracle we immediately wanted. Don't let it bother you. It doesn't bother Christ. It doesn't bother Jesus. Just go to him anyway. Let it all out. Just be you authentically, because frankly, if Christ is living in you, which is what I believe, then Christ already knows how you feel. So, let it out. Vent. God can take it. And then God will enfold you in his arms through the Christ in your heart. Don't ever let anyone tell you there's something wrong with you or your faith. I have heard that many times, that accusation of, well, you're not trusting God. No, I'm being human and I hurt. And God knows that and accepts that. And trust is a matter of practicing. Grieve when you need to grieve, and then go to Jesus in your heart with all that grief. And I'm telling you, you will be healed. It takes time, but you will be healed when we're ready. When we're ready to let go of the pain, we will one day, I promise, look back, and many of you know this, come on. You will look back and say, I learned a great deal from that experience. That's what redemption is, right? Christ can bring out these great lessons for growth, even in the worst experiences of our life. And many of you know I love learning from other religions. I love hearing how different people from different cultures and religions find their way to becoming God's love on earth. And frankly, all it does is just affirm my faith. When I went through that whole series of Joseph Campbell, the Power of Myth series, it didn't threaten my faith that there were many incarnation stories in many different religions. That doesn't threaten my faith. It just tells me that God is desperately trying to get in touch with us. It just affirms my faith. I simply believe that God speaks through many different ways and through many different people and cultures and religions. And so, for instance, the great Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh said words very similar to Jesus when he said, if we go to the Buddha with our hearts open, he will look at us, his eyes filled with compassion, and say, because there is suffering in your heart, it is possible for you to enter my heart. Jesus is revealing a universal message of God, which I believe God says through all religious traditions. That is, never keep your sorrow to yourself where it festers and seems overwhelming. It's like when you keep things in your head and you don't talk to anybody else, you don't vent to anybody, you don't go to someone to be comforted and have a good cry, everything in your head feels so much more exacerbated. The whole situation you're concerned with feels so much more exacerbated. I used to hear people say things like, don't go into your head alone. It's a scary place, right? Don't hold this stuff in. Let it out. Find safe people to share this stuff with, because otherwise it feels overwhelming, and it simply isn't necessary or even wise. And as followers of the way of Jesus, we're being asked to lay all our burdens down at the feet of Christ, and trust, and it's a practice, that one day we're going to be able to look back and realize how much we've grown, and particularly because of the difficult situations we've gone through. I don't know if I've ever really learned anything from doing something right. I know I've learned an awful lot. Every time I messed up something, I learned a lot. So I want to end with one of my all-time favorite prayers, which I probably quote way too often, but I think it's so appropriate for what I've been talking about today. And it's a prayer from Jesuit priest Teilhard de Chardin. He says, above all, trust in the slow work of God. We are quite naturally impatient in everything to reach the end without delay. We should like to skip the intermediate stages. We are impatient of being on the way to something unknown, something new. And yet it is the law of all progress that it is made by passing through some stages of instability, and that it may take a very long time. And so I think it is with you. Your ideas mature gradually. Let them grow. Let them shape themselves without undue haste. Don't try to force them on as though you could be today what time, that is to say, grace and circumstances acting on your own goodwill, will make of you tomorrow. Only God could say what this new spirit gradually forming within you will be. Give our Lord the benefit of believing that his hand is leading you, and accept the anxiety of feeling yourself in suspense and incomplete. If you ever get a chance to go onto YouTube, one of my teachers, James Finley, has a wonderful little meditation. And it's that we are like a little rock that's been dropped into the ocean. And we go down, 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 down. And we're floating down between two crevices. And every now and then, the rock finds a little ledge and grabs hold. I don't want to float down there anymore. I don't know what's down there. I can't tell. I can't control it. So if we cling to the little ledge, and the little ledge is all those little comforts that we have in life. Could be marriage, could be, our relationship with our kids. It could be money, certainly. And then, the tide washes us off back, and we're falling deeper into, let's say, the heart of God, the oceanic love of God. And yet, even knowing that, we still grab onto the ledges that we get blown to and from, because it helps us feel more, in charge, in control. And so I think that the thing to remember here is just let go and let God. Let's put it that way. It's pretty simple, right? But not easy. Let go and let God lead you to these new experiences of growth. And when you're feeling sad or frustrated or whatever, just hold on tight to your faith. I'm telling you, it will get you through anything. You are loved from head to foot, no matter what, no matter how many mistakes you make, you are loved. And there are people out there in this world that need to hear that. And that's our job, right? Go out into the world proclaiming God's love. Amen.